All right. Hello, friends. Hello, everyone. Anyone who tuned in to Kabbalah Explained Simply. Hello, everyone. My name is Asaf. You can call me Joseph if that's easier for you. Typically, that's easier for English speakers. Yeah, I'm broadcasting to you live from Israel, and today we're going to talk about three approaches to reality. We're gonna somewhat compare the approach to reality from three different perspectives: a religious perspective, a scientific perspective, and the Kabbalistic perspective. And we'll try to kind of put things in order and understand what's what. And as always, I am looking at the chat, and also my friends are helping me look at the chat so that any question at all that you are posting, we will try to get to it and to relate to it. So definitely send your questions into the chat. As soon as you have a question, don't think too much. Just make sure it's concise and has a question mark at the end, so we know that it's a question. And I'll do my best to get to it and to answer it. At the end of this live public session, we also have an extended Q&A Zoom session exclusively for the CobU students. So after this public event, we're going on Zoom. And if you are a CobU student, you should get a link in your email. And if you're not a CobU student, it's never too late to register. There's always a free trial that you can test out to see if CobU is something that works for you. And that will also give you access to the exclusive Q&A session on Zoom right after this public session. All right, so let's get into it. I'm already seeing that there's a bunch of people from many different places. I see Florida and the Netherlands, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Spain, Barcelona, Alberta, Canada, more Netherlands, some Seattle, Washington, North Carolina, Costa Rica. That's great. Norway, Salt Lake City. So, in short, we have representatives from many different places, and that's always great and heartwarming to see and to feel. Why? Because the universal desire that we all share for spiritual development, what we call in Kabbalah the point in the heart, that point that seeks the meaning and purpose of life, that thing goes beyond boundaries, beyond geography, beyond time and space, in fact. And that's the thing that brings us to the wisdom of Kabbalah. Hopefully, we can develop it further today. So that's it. Without further ado, let's get into it. Quick bumper or intro, however you want to call it, and we'll begin. All right, so three approaches to reality, and in order to get into some sort of a comparison and some sort of an understanding of the differences in the approach to reality between, let's say, religion, science, and Kabbalah, first we have to clarify what is it that we're actually asking here, right? Um, Essentially, we are talking about our attempt as human beings to understand our own existence, to understand the meaning and the purpose of our existence. Why are we here? What are the rules that govern us? Not just the rules of a biology, for example, governing how our body functions, but what is it that defines what happens to us in life? Is it good or bad? Is it true or false? Why are we here in the first place? Where are we headed as individuals, as a collective human species? What is my purpose in that general collective species? And what is the purpose of human life in general? What is the purpose of existence? If we're asking this type of questions, then first of all, if these questions are of interest to us, then most likely we have a mature desire for spiritual development. But when we're trying to understand the differences between religion, Kabbalah, and science, then essentially we're trying to understand the differences in the approach to these questions, the differences in how are we trying to provide answers to these questions. So let's start with belief systems, which could be religions, could be other type of belief systems, but essentially, when we're talking about a belief system, we're talking about accepting some stories that aim to answer those questions, those big questions about life and the purpose of existence. We're talking about accepting some stories, some narratives as true, which could provide answers to our questions. But in a belief system, we are not taking into account how that story or the narrative that we believe in, how that actually sits with our reason. And let me explain what I mean by that. The term reason, at least how we use it in our Kabbalah studies, when we talk about reason, we're not just talking about our logic. Some things could be more logical to us, some things could be less. But when we say reason, from at least from a Kabbalistic perspective, and at the end of the day, that's what we're doing here. Even this whole comparison between religion, science, and Kabbalah, I'm giving it to you from a Kabbalistic perspective because that's my expertise. And that's what this channel is about. So, of course, other experts or other analysts will give you a different kind of comparison. So, we're looking at this term called reason. Let's explain what it means. So, when I say reason, it's not just logic. Logic is maybe a part of it, but reason is a term that includes within it everything that my current perception can hold. So that means everything I feel in my heart, everything I understand with my mind, everything that I know and feel at a given moment, that is what I consider my current perception of reality, my current state of reason. And so, in a belief system, the approach to reality is to study and learn a certain story, a certain narrative that explains potentially who we are and what are we here to do and what's our purpose of existence, but not, if it's a belief system, I'm not going to try to match this belief or this, let's call it faith, with my reason. If I go into my reason to investigate what I actually know and what I actually feel right now opposite that story, I might find many contradictions. But in a belief system, the approach is to not try to match this with that or try to somehow uh, uh, get my belief to sit within my reason, but rather I detach the two. That is the basic idea. And of course, there are many nuances here, and there's different kinds of belief systems. There's also different kinds of religions. The farther you go back in history, religions looked and belief systems looked more polytheistic, meaning there were ideas about multiple gods and multiple authorities governing different things in the world, but possibly in conflict between them, which explains potentially the conflict we see here in our world. Then, as you advance more in history, monotheistic religions become more prevalent. And but either way, if it's a belief system, the approach is to accept a narrative as true and not to try to match it with what we experience within our reason. We also call this approach from a Kabbalistic perspective. We sometimes refer to this approach as faith below reason, meaning that my reason might object, might reject, might be in contradiction to the story that I believe in, but I am not trying to match the two, and my faith as if stays there without going to my reason and examining how it appears there. I hope you're following. I hope you're on the same page with me in terms of the terms that I'm using. If something is not clear, send the question in the chat, and I'm gonna keep going for now. So let's talk about the next approach to reality, which is science. Now, before I get into it, let's just examine what science really is engaged with today, because we started this examination from talking about an approach to reality as an approach to the big questions about reality. What's the purpose of existence? What's the purpose of human life? Why are we here? Where is this going? How were we created, and so forth? And the truth is, um, and I'm saying that as an academic person, the truth is that in most of science today, these questions are not the focus. Early scientists did want to know the purpose, and science, you could argue, begins from that. Science actually starts from philosophy, which is essentially, that was the place to be a scientist before technology developed, before the tools for science were really developed. The Newtonian physics, which is the fatherhood of all physics, you could say, only begins around 300 years ago or so. So the origins of science began much earlier than that, and it started with philosophers who asked about the purpose of existence and wanted to know something, but they were mostly contemplating it until science came along and basically developed tools and mathematical ways of assessing reality, and so on and so forth. But the truth is that today, how much of science actually deals with why are we here, what's the purpose of human existence, where are we headed, and what's the purpose of creation itself, and so on, and what is creation? How much of science deals with that? I would say not so much. Most of science today deals with mostly how to make things work better for us in this world, which is also good. I'm not belittling that. I'm just saying that it's not the same as trying to explore, investigate in a serious way the big questions about life and about existence. And so, how does science approach what it does? So, science essentially, if we look at this prism of faith and reason, science, we could say, uh, it deals with what we can test within our reason. So, very contrary to belief systems, and also there were many big conflicts throughout history. As science developed, there was a lot of conflict with the church, with religions, and so forth. Today, this in a way, you could say that science learned how to live with religion, and religion learned how to live with science to some extent. Of course, there's still a lot of debates, a lot of conflicts, and so on. But there's kind of a place for this and a place for that. And you could see today scientists that are religious, and this can still be, they can still live in the same reality. And I think part of it is actually because, as I said earlier, science, most of it actually doesn't deal that much with the big questions. But in any case, how does science study the world? Through what is observed, what can be tested, what can be experimentally proven. There's room for hypothesis, there's room for ideas, there's room for creative thinking, of course, but then everything has to be tested within our reason. Everything has to be proven through our current degree of perception. Our material perception, which happens through our five senses and processed in our brains, that has to be, that's the place, the device the vessel, if you will, where we want to see the outcomes of science. That's how science works. If something cannot be proven in these means, then in many cases it will not have room in science. It will not have a place. Um, just like if a theory, for instance, in science is not falsifiable, then it doesn't hold water as a serious theory in science. And so what that creates is, on the one hand, this rigorous way of examining reality, which allows us to be very empirical, to base everything we do on experience and to get to true results. And science is an amazing progress of mankind. It created amazing progress in how to make things work better for us in our world. That includes medicine, and that includes technology, and that includes the fact that we are now talking to each other above geography and above time zones. And our whole world is characterized by our technologies and the sciences that brought about these technologies. So there's no doubt this science is uh, um, a massive advancement of the human culture. That being said, it is focused more on the how. It helps us understand how the world works, how nature works, through the observable reality and the experimentally proven reality within our reason. And so on the flip side here, the other side of this is that science is also limiting in how much it can actually help us explore the big questions when we can't find ways to experiment and test and approve them through our current reason. And so, in a sense, we sometimes relate to this as faith within reason. Um, in other words, and that's a bit of a paradoxical thing. I'll linger on it for just a minute, because we tend to think about science as anything but faith, right? As scientists, we don't. If we're scientists, we're not believing anything. We don't have faith in something. We have ideas, we have hypotheses, we have approximations, and then we test them. But that implies that we trust our reason. Meaning, if something can be observed, can be measured, can be tested through our five senses and the tools that expand the range of the sensitivity of our five senses, like a microscope or a telescope, right? Or a particle accelerator, doesn't matter what it is. But if we can examine it and experiment with it in our current perception, in our reason, then we trust it. Um, and we even relate to it as objective and real if we can feel it through our five senses and see that a certain law works the way we think. Like, I drop this thing, it falls down. This is a way for us to test the law of gravity. But that still means that we absolutely trust our reason, and that also means that if there is a reality beyond our reason, then we cannot trust it from a scientific perspective until we experiment with it and test it within our reason. And so that is what, from a Kabbalistic perspective, we sometimes call faith within reason, because from a Kabbalistic perspective, this is still a kind of faith. It's just that a kind of belief or faith. You just have faith. You have trust in your current senses and mind and experience. Um, Hope you're following. We're gonna get to the next step here, and then I'm gonna take a look at some questions. So again, I remind you, if you have questions on what we're talking about or something related to it, go ahead, throw it into the chat. My friends behind the scenes here will help me pick up those questions, and I'll do my best to get to them and to answer them. So go ahead and do that. So we talked about belief systems, we talked about science. Where does Kabbalah fit into all of this? So in Kabbalah, we don't reject our reason. We work with it. We work with it with the aim to rise above it. And that's something that needs to be further clarified. So remember, we talked about reason as in our current perception. It's everything that we feel, everything that we know in a given moment. That is my reason. And in Kabbalah, we don't reject it. We don't ignore it. We don't erase it. We always use that as a basis. In other words, we come back to this reality. It doesn't matter what we're studying about and where we're trying to go spiritually. We go back to what is it that we currently actually perceive, actually know, actually feel. This is called in Kabbalah, the judge has only what his eyes see. And this is essentially what is practiced in scientific exploration. You want to see the actual results of your experiment, so to speak. You want to test and feel and know things within your reason. Yet, our development, our spiritual development, can be described as faith above reason. What does that mean? It means that while we are working with our reason, we are studying on how to rise to a higher degree of perception. And that requires us to, on the one hand, know our current perception, but on the other hand, try to climb higher. And that means relinquishing our current perception after we've identified what it is, but being able to open ourselves to a higher level. And a higher level of perception doesn't mean to just refine our current perception. This is something that scientists do well with, for instance, a microscope. I can't see deep into matter with my eyes. Using a microscope, I can. I can't see very far. Using a telescope, I can. That is an expansion of the range of my current senses, but it isn't an ascent beyond my current reason. And so, um, so Kabbalists are aiming us. They don't offer us to believe them when they talk about the spiritual reality, and essentially the whole Kabbalistic texts are an account of the attainment of Kabbalists of the spiritual reality. That's what they're writing about. If you open, for example, the 2,000 plus pages of the study of the 10 Sfirot, written about 500 years ago as the Tree of Life composition by the great Ari, the great Kabbalist back then, and interpreted as the study of the 10 Sfirot by the great Kabbalist of the previous century, Baal HaSulam. If you open that, you will encounter a text that is filled with detail, filled with super technical, high precision information. Even if you don't understand a word about what it's actually saying, you can, just from skimming through the text, you understand it's talking about a system, and a very detailed system. And so Kabbalists don't expect us to believe them about the spiritual reality. They expect us to use their accounts as a device for us to climb higher from our perception to the perception of the spiritual reality. So they when they tell us about the qualities of the Creator, the governing force of nature, and by the way, from a Kabbalistic perspective, saying nature or saying God is synonymous. Barasulam writes this in his article, "The Peace." A result of that uh, is that the numerical value, what we call gematria in Kabbalah, which is the value of the Hebrew letters, whether you say Elokim, which is the word for God, or Hateva, which is the word for nature, you end up at the same value of 86, and that's just one of the results or the side effects of how these terms are synonymous from a spiritual perspective, from a Kabbalistic perspective. And so Kabbalists don't offer us to believe their stories, they offer us to rise to their level. And that means you always have to work with your current perception. And when you, for instance, study something from the texts of Kabbalah about the spiritual reality, you may study it and say, wait a minute, I feel a completely different reality. For example, the Kabbalists are talking about one thought, one force governing all of reality, and all the contradictions that we experience in reality being just different aspects of our perception. Now, when I read that and study that, I might say, this is not my experience at all. I don't see one force governing the world. I see many different kind of forces, and that is what my current perception shows me. And that is correct. And that investigation of what my current reason shows me is required for Kabbalistic development, for spiritual development. But then I know what is my current reason. The judge has only what his eyes see, and I know what to aim for. And that allows me to develop my desire. The desire is the tool, the main tool for progress in spiritual development. It allows me to develop my desire to transcend my current perception and let it go for a higher one. And then I have a higher reason. I have a greater reason. And then again, if I want to climb up the spiritual ladder, that will entail rising above my reason again. And so we call that approach faith above reason, but it's very different from belief or from a belief system. It's actually exactly opposite. All right, so I think we'll pause at this point and let's take a look and see if you have some questions. So I am seeing, first of all, yes, I'm looking at the chat. I'm seeing that there's some action there. That's great to see. More viewers have joined us from different places. That's always awesome to see. And I see a question here from To Be Conscious. Can Kabbalah answer why it is that there is so much fascination about push towards virtual reality and augmented reality, lab-produced meat, and so forth? Okay, not sure how directly related it is to the topic we're talking about now, but I'll say a few words about it. Um, my teacher, Kabbalist Dr. Michael Lightman, said a long time ago, that was maybe 15 years ago. First of all of the AI development that is happening today very rapidly is something that he was talking about 15 years ago. And I won't go into a lot of details in that, but this is something that became kind of obvious to him as in terms of where the corporeal of development of humanity is going. It has to do with how we're becoming increasingly interconnected, and AI and also virtual reality. They're both manifestations of the connection, the interconnection and interdependence that's happening across the globe in the human species. But why is there such fascination about it? Well, part of it is because one of the things, and I wanted to get back to one of the things my teacher said about it, is that the virtual world is, in a way, kind of a passage, or the beginning of a passageway through which we go through as a collective human species towards spiritual development. It doesn't mean that by using the virtual world or going into putting on VR goggles and getting into VR kind of a reality, or AR, augmented reality, it doesn't mean that that is by any means spiritual. No. But the qualities, the properties of the virtual reality, they somewhat prepare us to digest spiritual development, because in the virtual world we're all connected above time, above space. We're all experiencing that virtual reality not directly through our bodies, but through some sort of a virtual entity that's always online. We're always connected to each other all the time. Doesn't matter where we are physically. Um, the kind of space, the virtual space, is it depends on what we want to do with it. It is less defined by the five senses and the material limitations that we have here. And so I'm not. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but essentially, the virtual world is a kind of a step towards the spiritual world, and that explains why this is happening en masse and becomes such a big thing in human development, because in our time, humanity as a collective is already beginning to move towards spiritual development. Of course, it happens without the awareness of most people, but it's still happening and brewing under the hood, or behind the scenes. People are developing towards the need for spiritual ascent, and that's just a part of it. All right. Okay, let's see if we have some more questions here. Maybe we'll take one or two more and then move forward a bit. Raphael is asking, what is Kabbalah's position on the simulation hypothesis? That's a good question, if you're interested in the simulation hypothesis. But you know what? I think I actually specifically did a session, another Kabbalah Explained Simply session, specifically on this. So I would say just search through our channel. I'm sure you'll find it. There's an entire session that I dedicated specifically to that. What's the simulation hypothesis? What is it actually saying versus how Kabbalah explains reality? So I think I'll just refer you to there, and you'll get a complete answer there. But yeah, it is an interesting thing that a lot of people show interest in the simulation hypothesis, which is basically the idea that we live in a kind of simulation. And to give like a one-liner about it, yes, we do live in a kind of a simulation, but it's not at all generated by a computer or by some digital entity outside of us, or some more advanced civilization. No, it's the spiritual reality is the root of what we think of as the material reality. All of the material reality is our perception. That has a lot to do with our reason. Our current reason interprets reality as material. We think of ourselves as, we feel ourselves, we identify with this concept of a body that lives and dies for a certain amount of time, and we think of our existence as life and death of the physical body. But that is a kind of a perception, an illusory perception, that allows us to develop towards conscious, volitional, independent spiritual development. And that's all I'm going to say about that now, because again, go to that session and you'll get more detail on that. Okay, let's go forward a bit. If you have more questions, throw them into the chat. I'll do my best to do another pause for questions in just a few minutes. So, um, so what is really this faith above reason that we are talking about? I want to go to a really nice quote from my teacher, Kabbalist Dr. Michael Lightman, where he related to this concept. So let's read it, and I'll say a few words about that. So he says this: faith above reason is a different force altogether. It's a force of bestowal that we have to acquire. And that depends on the connection between us and beyond through love thy friend as thyself. Okay, so there is a lot zipped or packed into this quote. Let's try to unpack it a little bit. So first of all, when we're talking about faith above reason in a Kabbalistic sense, we're talking about rising to a higher level of perception. What does that really mean? Why is that a different force altogether? Because to achieve a higher perception means that we have to climb higher, get closer to the source of all knowledge, of all being, of all existence, the source of reality. If we want to rise above our limited reason, our limited perception, and rise to a higher perception, that means getting closer to the source of all of reality. You can call it the creator, you can call it God, you can call it nature, the governing force of nature, the thought of creation. There's many ways in which Kabbalists at least relate to that, but it is the source of everything that is to be known, everything that is to be perceived, everything that exists, the source of all being. And if we want to know more, feel more of reality than what we currently feel and know, then we have to go closer to that source. What does it mean to go closer? That happens, as Kabbalists explain, through a process we call equivalence of form. In other words, to get closer to the source of existence, we can't just walk towards it like we do in the physical world, or take a cab, or go on a plane, because the distance is not a physical distance. It is rather a spiritual distance. And the law that operates in the spiritual reality is called equivalence of form, which means that if we equalize ourselves with something, then spiritually we're close to it. And so the closer we want to be to the source of being, the source of existence, the more similar we need to be in our qualities. This is called equivalence of form. I'm simplifying it here a little bit, but just to make it easy and fit in this session. So what is the quality of the creator that we need to become similar to? Kabbalists describe from their attainment, from their discovery, they describe this quality of the source of reality, the spiritual force that governs all of reality. They discover its qualities as qualities of unconditional love, unconditional bestowal and giving, the quality that gives and creates and sustains and guides all of nature. It is a quality of unconditional love and bestowal. And so, if we want to understand, to know, feel more than our current reason, we have to become similar to that force. And that means that we have to expand or transform our qualities from only being focused on our self-interest, typically, because that's how we are created. We're all created as egoistic beings. Some of us feel it more, some of us feel it less, but that's the fundamental nature we were created in. And if we grow out of this nature, if we become more and more uh, um, immersed in the quality of love and bestowal. And this in Kabbalah is called developing our intention. Above all of our desires, we develop an intention of love and bestowal towards reality. And that's how we can become in equivalence of form with the Creator. That's how we rise above our current reason. And that is why the Kabbalists from thousands of years ago encapsulated this entire formula for spiritual development through the words, love thy friend as thyself, which essentially means it's not some ethics or morality, or just it's not about smiling to other people, just being kind in this world. Sure, that's not bad, but that's not what spiritual development is about. Love thy friend as thyself is actually about how we equalize our perception with the Creator, just as He or it, doesn't matter how you refer to the Creator at this point, just as He bestows and loves towards all of reality, we want to have the same kind of intention. And that is what changes our perception. And there's a whole ladder. This is called the spiritual ladder, or the ladder of spiritual degrees. There's a whole ladder of doing that bit by bit by bit. And that is how we expand and grow and ascend in our spiritual perception, bit by bit by bit. So that's the approach in Kabbalah, and that's what we mean by faith above reason. Okay. Here's one more question from Vezi. Vezi Bine. I hope I'm pronouncing your name or your nickname correctly. You're saying this: religions are also supporting a relationship with God and connection and unity in this goal, in this spirit. Not sure if you already said it, but what exactly is the difference? Yes, you probably joined a little later. We discussed quite a bit about the difference, but look, I'll say a few more words about it. Kabbalah is not a belief system at all, and it's very far from religion. Even unfortunately, in some cases, religious circles reject Kabbalah because Kabbalah is based on attainment of the upper force. It comes from people who share their account, their discovery, and give us, and while this cannot be shared in words, because this is something a person has to feel, they do share with us a method for how to climb the spiritual ladder. And that essentially means that if you are supposed to attain the Creator and not just believe it, then all of the power of certain people who might have positions of power because of that belief, that is being challenged. And that is why there can be a dissonance. On the other hand, Kabbalists are inviting anyone to study the wisdom of Kabbalah. And as evidence to that, in our organization, which is a global institute for teaching and educating and sharing with people the authentic wisdom of Kabbalah, we have students from all over the world, some religious, some atheists, some secular, some come from a more religious background, Muslims and Christians and Jews and Hindus. We literally have everything. And what we see is that people who study this wisdom for a while, they begin to know how to relate to all of these things, and there is no conflict. They can find the place for their religious customs, and they can also find the place for their inner spiritual work, that where they actually work in a practical way to develop their sense of the upper world, the spiritual world, to develop their qualities to become like the spiritual reality. And so it's not really a conflict if someone has a true point in the heart, a desire for spirituality, and they begin to develop, they can see where to put each thing in its right place. But yes, there's the difference is that it's not based on belief. Kabbalah is not based on belief, it's based on attainment. Attainment in Kabbalah is a very special word, by the way. It means to fully know something to the ultimate degree of knowing. It's not knowing in your mind, like a physicist knows well about the three laws of motion, let's say, or the laws of thermodynamics, or whatever what have you. Yeah, because this is intellectual knowledge. When we're talking about spiritual attainment, we're talking about becoming the thing that you are trying to know. We're talking about, uh, uh, like love. You can't explain love. You can, but that's just an intellectual explanation. Love has to be felt. So you have to develop to a point where you can feel love. You also can't explain love, or imagine that a 5-year-old can feel love, like, let's say, an adult, right? They just don't have the emotional vessels. And so that is what happens when we're talking about spiritual development. We're talking about developing new emotional sensors towards reality, new emotional vessel in which to feel what we call me, the others, the world, other people, nature, reality. All of that takes on a different meaning, a different shape within you as you go through the study and the practice of Kabbalah. That's what it's about. All right. We're going to, I do need to conclude, and maybe we'll do just, uh, um, yes, here's what we're going to do. I do see a few more questions. Um, if you are interested in getting these questions answers, come to the Zoom session right after this. We'll start in just a few minutes. If you're not a Kabu student and you want to join this Zoom session, you can. I'll ask my friends to write in the chat, to put in the chat the link again, where you can go ahead and register and do that. And I will, before I go, I will end with an exercise to, if you're interested in starting to experiment with everything we discussed today, then here's a quick exercise for you. All right. So it goes like this. Wait, let me show you my screen again. Okay. So it goes like this. Let's start from, I'll just read the quote again from my teacher, Michael Leitman. And I'll read it and then explain. So he said this: start exercising that everything that happens is done by the Creator. I relate to anything I think is happening as the Creator only. So what is he telling us here? I'm gonna, to make it easier, I'm just gonna say for the next day, or for the next 2 days, or for the next week, but start from a day. Try to relate to everything that you experience. And I mean everything: your personal life, your social life, what you see on the news, the weather, your boss at work, your spouse, your dog, your kids, everything around you, and everything inside you, your innermost thoughts, desires, and passions that no one else knows about, your ideas about life, your thinking about what's right and wrong, or good or bad, or near or far, everything in your reality, everything in your experience. And I'm taking the time to detail it just so you understand how total it has to be. All of your inner world and all of your outer world. Try to see all of that as done by, and coming to you from, and projected to you from one source, one governing force that designs and shapes everything in your reality, from your inner world to the outer world, everything that you experience, everything you do, think, and feel. This principle in Kabbalah is called none else besides him, meaning all of reality is governed by one force. And if you try to practice that is beyond your reason, because your current perception doesn't tell you that. We are born into this reality, this material reality, with a material perception. We don't see how everything connects to a single thought. We don't see that there's one force governing the world. We see many different forces, many different sources of influence that change me and shape me, from the boss at work to my spouse at home to my kids to the news to the weather and so forth. And it seems to us like a shattered picture with many different forces and sources of influence. And what you're trying to see through all those different differences and different sources, you're trying to see just one source as if in dialogue with you through these shattered pieces. That's what you're trying to do. And that work is trying to rise above your current reason, of course. And that will begin to put you in a situation where you sometimes feel it a little bit more, sometimes less. You'll begin to sort of feel these vibrations. We call them ups and downs in the spiritual work, or ascents and descents. And the definitions for these also, for those also changes and develops as you develop spiritually. But try that as an exercise. Just try it on yourself and see what happens, and see if you're beginning to get some sort of feedback, some sort of new idea, new thought, new feeling on how to relate to reality. You're not erasing your reason. You're always going back to it and seeing what you actually know and feel, but you're trying to work with this Kabbalistic depiction of reality and measure yourself against that. All right? So, hope you'll try it out. Hope you'll discover new things. And I'll be signing off at this point, and wishing you all the best spiritually and materially. And I will see the Kabu students or anyone who wants to join us in the Zoom session in about 5 minutes from now. I'll be there and take some questions on this topic or any topic at all that Kabbalah might shed some light on. So I'll see you there. And thank you, everyone, for being here, and all the best. Bye bye.